Vancouver Hockey Show, another edition of the VHS. Andrew Wadden and producer Aaron here with you. The Canucks are on a big road trip right now, as you guys know. 4 games through 5. They'll wrap things up Tuesday night against the Chicago Blackhawks, but just sort of recapping the week, and let's just get right into the rewind right now, Aaron, because it's been an interesting week for the Vancouver Canucks, and we saw a new star debut. They go 2-1-1 as we record this with a Tuesday win over Carolina, a 3-2 regulation victory. They lose 4-0 in Boston on Thursday. Saturday, 4-3 OT loss in Detroit, which was a game that I don't think Rick Tocchet liked too much, at least in the end. And then Sunday, a pretty interesting game against the Washington Capitals, a 3-2 overtime victory there. JT Miller getting gifted the final goal in overtime. So here's what we know about what happened throughout the week. The 12-game point streak gets snapped at 12 games. So that was snapped in Boston. The loss to the Bruins and the Red Wings was their first back-to-back losses since mid-November. It's only the second time, Aaron, they've lost back-to-back games, but then people could quibble with that as well because they did get a point in Detroit. So technically, they've only lost outright in regulation once all season, and that was very early in the season. So just, again, some incredible stats that we seem to pull out for this team and just the season that they are having right now. They did blow that 3-1 lead in Detroit. Mm-hmm. So like I said, that's probably a game that Rick Tocchet's going to go and look back on. But it's interesting too, because, that Detroit loss, which should have been in the bag. If you're up 3-1 in the third, you should be able to lock it down. The Canucks have been that kind of team. I believe that was only the second time that they've lost a game all season after leading after 40 minutes. But they have not lost. They haven't blown a game in regulation yet. So they still get points in those 2 losses. But still, you see sort of bad things sort of leaking into the Canucks. And that's what Rick Tocchet has been able to, plug all season long. And the reason why I say that is because, of course, that Detroit loss followed the Boston shutout loss, which, of the games that we witnessed this past week, the Boston game, a couple of bad bounces, those shorthanded goals. Obviously, you got to clean that up. 4-0 game. Was it a 4-0 game? Probably not. And I know Tocchet said it post-game, just a couple of bad bounces. But when you see what happened in Detroit, that's when, you get a bit of cause for concern if you're Rick Tocchet.
And one thing that stuck out to me on this road trip is giving up the first goal within the first 2 minutes. The Canucks,
that's 6 straight games that they've allowed the first goal. They were scored on in the first minute in Detroit and Boston, and then 68 seconds into the Washington game. So yeah, they get on their heels right away. And that's something that we have not seen all season from the Canucks. So it's kind of good to get that. And I know that DT said it on the broadcast, and I absolutely agreed with him. He said it right at the start of the third period. He said, this feels like a big period. And he's like, not to overstate it, but this feels like a big period in the road trip, because you get a dub here, you move on to Chicago and you're feeling good about yourselves.
Yep.
Right. And DT absolutely nailed it. And then the fact
that was a good third period. There were like no whistles.
That was a good game,
fast.
Aaron.
Yeah.
I thought, to be honest with you, I quite enjoyed all the games. And that's why I was sort of defending that loss to Boston, because I didn't think it was that bad of a game. It was just like the head coach said, a couple of bad bounces. And then, those shorthanded goals. You're not allowing 2 shorthanded goals. They've only allowed 6 all season. 3 on this trip. So this is an outlier right now for them. It's not a problem, but it's definitely something that they're going to have to nip in the bud. If it continues like this, yeah, then it is. But let's not make it out into anything bigger than what it is, right? But that Carolina win was a solid dub. And then, Detroit played hard. You got to give them credit for the win that they got over the Canucks, because they're in a battle right now. I thought the same about Washington. I thought Washington was going to pull it out, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And Washington need points. They need all the points they can get. So it's interesting, because I think what we saw this week too is the league sort of, all right, it's go time.
Yep.
Right? Dog days are done. That post-Christmas, right before the All-Star break, football's going in the NFL. So everybody, everybody's focused on the playoffs, and hockey kind of becomes secondary for the, sports fans out there. And then, here we are, Super Bowl weekend. They get back from the All-Star game, and it's like the temperature gets turned up in the NHL. If you want to put it up to, in Spinal Tap terms, they turn it up to 11 May.
Well, we got the trade deadline looming, so like now's the time to test. Like, where do we need help?
Also, too, teams just realize we've got 30. Most teams have 30, 32 games left. Like, we got to get going here, right? And a veteran team like Washington, who's had their struggles all season, they would know better than most. And they gave the Canucks a good fight. I thought that was a really good game, and I thought, like I said, I thought all the games this week were quite good. A few things to sort of be concerned about. I did talk about the shorthanded goals, 3 on the trip. Yeah, that sucks. That's not great. And 2 against Boston too. A team like Boston is just, it's a little more salt in the wound when it's the Bees.
And I'll say it so you don't have to. Still no goal from Mikheyev.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to get there. Yeah, you're right, though. I mean, I keep talking about it on TikTok as well. Like, I just feel like I'm just hammering the guy. But let me get to that a little bit later, because I do want to pose something to you that we sort of started unpacking on last week's pod, but I want to break it down a little bit further. So we will get to that. But yeah, it's a quarter of the season now. It's 21 games. Like, that's freaking ridiculous. So is your 10th bench minor. The Canucks got their 10th bench minor against the Hurricanes. And then that led to the game tying goal. That was late in the second period. Could you imagine a bench minor in the playoffs costing you a game, go ahead goal in a game, big momentum swinging tie, like that, potentially would have been if that was a power or a postseason game. Like, that's the kind of stuff you have to clean up. And it's, it's not talking and then barking at the refs or anything like that. It's just line change stuff, right? Just poor line changes. So the Canucks, they got to get on top of that, especially come the postseason. Okay, lastly, on the rewind of the week here, I liked the gritty celly by Wallman against the Red Wings, or again when they lost to the Red Wings. I'm sorry. I thought it was fine. I thought it was fun. I know Canuck fans didn't like it because it was a loss for them. Still got a point, though. Let's have some fun. The NHL needs a little bit more fun. Okay, let's dive into the meteor news of the week. Start with I almost caught myself. Elias Lindholm. It's funny, I did a TikTok video after his debut in Carolina, and I got the video done, Aaron, and then I realized that I had called him Elias at one point. I had to redo that part. It's going to happen a bunch, so get used to it.
Last names only, man. That's
let's just call him Lindy or Lindholm or something, whatever. But scores twice in that debut in Carolina, which is fantastic. I mean, net front is something that, wow, I mean, Kuzi was great at, right? Kuzi was fantastic of getting those little, short putts that he used to put in the net all the time. And so it's great to have Lindholm sort of present that net front once again on the power play.
But can we also just say that first goal, how he hooked that back in on that Hughes shot? I mean, that was like some big bass fish in there. That was way out, and he just brought that right back in.
I like that analogy. Just hooked it right out there. But it's too, what I thought was kind of cool about that, because you did see Lindholm like look at Hughes like, yeah. And they had maybe a short time on the ice together, right? Maybe some discussions of, hey, what you want to do here? I believe they had one practice the night before the Carolina game, and then I guess a morning skate as well.
And they kind of hung out at the All-Star, but like...
Yeah, but that's a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
Point is that like he put the shot in the place, because Hughes is so smart. So is Lindholm as well, right? Lindholm's been around this league, is 800 games or something like that in the league. The guy's a star, right? He's an all-star. So yeah, you're right. That was just a great play by a great connection between the two. And then the Boston game wasn't so great. Him and PD, suffered the wrath of the coach in the second period, saw their ice time. Like, people are like, oh, they got benched. Yeah, they did. Like, they technically did. But if you go and look at the shift chart, like, they got their ice limited, is what I would say. Then they flip the lines all around. He centers, in Detroit, that is, he centers Miller and Besser. And, we'll see what comes of that. Right? I think they're still trying to find that right mix in the top 6. We saw Höglander get elevated against Detroit and stayed there in Washington, consecutive games with goals as well. So I think that's something that, I don't know if we necessarily have been crying about that on the pod, but we've definitely been suggesting that, right? Yes, he's produced on the fourth line. Like, when's he going to get his shot? And I'm not going to say that you or I were, on the top of the mountain, like, he's got to get here. But now that he's there, let him have a shot. To me, again, like I said, feels like it's long overdue, but the coach made him earn it. Now he's earning it. Trust him a little, like, let the leash a little bit more. Give him a couple more feet, right?
Yep.
16 goals, Aaron.
Yeah. I'd just like to give some credit where credit's due while we're talking about this Detroit game as well.
Okay.
How about that PK? 7 minutes straight.
Oh, yeah. Totally. I want to get to the Zadorov suspension in that game as well. But yeah, Höglander, like as Mikheyev flounders, he goes 21 games. That's really freaking hard to do, especially with somebody with his abilities as well. His shot's a muffin. It's an absolute muffin. He doesn't have the speed anymore. Sorry, I shouldn't say he doesn't have the speed anymore. He's coming off a knee injury it's hard to get back to that, especially this early, since the return from the injury. Like, it's going to take him a while, right? If he get back.
Maybe he tweaked it and he's just a little ginger with it, right? But
there's something up with Mikheyev's game for sure. But point is this, Höglander, let's just see that through for a little while. Beauty goal against the Caps. Great deflection goal against Detroit. Loved that. He's putting pressure on, the other guys that have found themselves a home in the top six, whether it's P.S. Suter or Ilya Mikheyev. And right now it's Mikheyev who's down on the fourth line. But Suter's got to be looking over his shoulder as well. Not only that, like that could lead us into trade deadline.
I thought Suter and Hogs were like really getting in people's faces in that Caps game.
No, I liked them. I liked both their games. You're absolutely right. One of the great things about Höglander in those 16 goals is the value that you're getting out of that.
Oh, yeah.
He makes $1.1 million. So that's $68,750 per goal. Like that ties him with Dakota Joshua.
That's almost dollar store prices there.
For standard contracts in the NHL, like taking ELCs out of this, that's third in the NHL in terms of the least amount that you pay per goal. That's unreal. And the Canucks have two guys tied for third in the NHL at $68,750 per goal. And we know that third line keep them there. I loved their game against the Capitals as well. Garland had that goal.
Oh, beauty.
It seemed early on as the Canucks sort of tried to find their footing in that game. And yeah, they fell behind early as they've been doing as of recent. But it felt like it was that third line that sort of kept them in early, just sort of kept that pace. They were in on the forecheck hard. Joshua was throwing himself around. Like, yeah, I really liked what I saw from that third line. But again, as far as top six is concerned, I really like what we're seeing from Nils Höglander. Mikheyev, not so much. Zadorov, though. So Nikita Zadorov gets a 2-game suspension for the hit that he had on Lucas Raymond coming through the neutral zone there in the game against the Red Wings. Now, you can quibble about the suspension all you want. The NHL is, you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. It's a stupid analogy, I know. But it's literally like that. You don't know what you're going to get. Like if Lucas Raymond doesn't return in that game, are we looking at 5 games for Zadorov? Keep in mind here too, like, there was not intent. It's a headshot. I get, like, don't get me wrong. It's a headshot. You saw the way Lucas Raymond spun out there. He didn't even know where he was for a bit.
Oh yeah, no, he seemed like from contact to landing on the ice, nothing there, right? Yeah. Like, yeah, no, so bad shot.
So it's a headshot, and there's, people can say, well, there's no intent. Of course there was no intent, but it's a timing thing. His timing was off. He clipped him in the head. You got to pay for that. Now it's the suspension part that I think that people just can't figure out right now, right? Because like I said, if Raymond doesn't come back, that's going to be worse for Zadorov. So the NHL needs to figure out exactly what the hell they're doing come suspensions and player safety and whatnot. But for those that are upset about the suspension in general, I'm sorry, I disagree with you. You have to take headshots out of the game. You have to. And the only way that you're going to be able to enforce that is to enforce the punishment. Now, figuring out what the punishment is in terms of being consistent with it, that's where the NHL needs to improve.
So 2 games. So that means that he's coming back when they get home here to Vancouver. Yeah. So Andrew, is that game going to be a little spicy, do you think?
Well, it's against Detroit. No, because that's right, because he missed the Washington game. Yeah. So yeah, it's home to Detroit. I mean, I don't know. Like again,
things were getting things were getting a little testy in that Detroit game.
Well, like I said, it just feels like things are going to get testy from here on out. Like this is the stretch drive now, right? So, in Chicago on Tuesday, maybe not so much. The Blackhawks don't have a hell of a lot to play for. Mm-hmm. Canucks find themselves down. They might be a little testy though.
Yeah.
But yeah, after that, once they get home, you're looking at Detroit and Winnipeg on a Thursday and a Saturday. Those are going to be tough games. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like, do I think that someone's going to go and headhunt Zadorov? Well, if they are, they better be ready for a fight.
Yeah, better be more prepared than that Cole fight. I mean, whoa.
Oh my, yeah. DeBrincat definitely wants to rethink that one. I think DeBrincat I don't know what he was thinking. You could see it too. He wanted it. Like he was the one that wanted it. I think Cole was like, all right, dude, you want to take this ride? We can do it. But getting back to what you're saying there, yeah, will there be some spice? Probably, because just, again, it's that time of the year, and like a team like Detroit.
Quick turnaround too. It's not like a month later.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
It was such weird schedules NHL has. You don't see them all season, and then you see them twice in 5 games. 4 games. There's me counting live on the podcast again. Right. But yeah, no, this is playoff hockey. I mean, essentially this is playoff hockey for the Canucks, but they got themselves such a nice cushion right now. But yeah, for Detroit, like, this is playoff hockey. So will there be spice? Yeah, I think there'll be some spice, but I don't think anybody's going to be, looking for Zadorov, and nor do I think DeBrincat's going to go anywhere near Cole as well. You probably want to stay away from him. It feels like Elias Pettersson's been in the crosshairs a little bit with the fan base. And I know he had the tough game against Boston, got one shorthanded goal. The effort on the back check was just awful. And I know a lot of people are making a big deal about the lack of 5-on-5 scoring. He got his first since like mid-January. Although he had that OT goal. So regardless, guys, these are the ebbs and flows of the season for a player. Look who Petey's been saddled with. He's had a guy on his wing. He was dragging around the corpse of Ilya Mikheyev and his lack of scoring over the last quarter of the season. And we saw with Lotto, like the Lotto line, they cash in every time. But there's a problem with that. You rely on them too much, then you're not getting the secondary scoring. That's not going to work out. It's pretty obvious, right? But I think one of the things that people are getting on with Petey about was, just this whole contract negotiation. And, I have mentioned that, listen, like, there is a concern. Until he puts pen to paper, like, I'm concerned about it. It's that simple. But some people suggesting that he's not worth, $12 million per season. I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Like, that's what the market dictates. Now, will the Pettersson camp demand that much? Would they be more flexible? That's debatable and probably unlikely, but still debatable. But at the same time, too, to sit there and go, well, he's not a $12 million player. Well, I can show you a number of comparables that say he is and might be even more. So listen, Petey's going to cost a lot. That's what superstar players cost in this league. If you want to have them, you got to pay for them. The Matt Tkachuks of the league who took less money, they're rare. And as much as I like Matthew Tkachuk, look at the numbers. Petey's are better. And I'm just using Tkachuk as an example, by the way. But again, Aaron, like, don't you agree, or maybe you disagree? This is the price you have to pay to have players like Petey.
Yeah, you do. But there is one thing with Pettersson that you and I have talked about recently that we don't like. The Pettersson pout is back.
A little bit. The body language sucks from time to time. Didn't help that they caught him yawning on the bench in the Detroit game as well. I mean, he's human, whatever. It's just a bad look. I get it. These morning games are, I guess, they're afternoon for the players. But listen, it's a good problem to have with Elias Pettersson. If Elias Pettersson does pull, again, a Matt Tkachuk like he did to Calgary and forces the hand to get moved out of town, so be it. Like, so be it. I know that sounds ridiculous to say out loud, but like, he's a massive asset, and when the trade for Calgary and Florida happened, everybody praised it. Oh, look at the Flames did. Oh my goodness. They got a 115-point player in Huberdeau and, Mackenzie Weegar, and sure. But like, and who saw Huberdeau falling off a cliff? Nobody did. Again, point is this though. We're not there yet at all. We're not even close to being there. But at the same time too, like, people understand P's going to cost a lot. Good players do. One guy that costs too much right now is Ilya Mikheyev. At $4.75 million, he is worth what? He's on a fourth line right now. He's not even worth a quarter of what he's making at the moment. Now, some people can push back and say it isn't always about the counting stats with Mikheyev, and you're right about that. He does kill penalties, so he's a special team guy. But I'm just sitting there looking at things when it comes.
Well, you compared to it earlier. No, Höglander, cost per goal.
Yeah, I could pull up Mikheyev here. What's the point? We know it's a lot.
Dakota Joshua, too. Better cost per goal.
Yeah, now Dakota Joshua could find himself being like an Ilya Mikheyev, though, in the next little while. Ilya Mikheyev got paid for, I believe he scored 20 in Toronto, hit free agency, and got overpaid. That's what happens in free agency. So Dakota Joshua, good luck to you, because you might be one of those guys as well. Now, following that up is the hardest part of the whole thing, right? And in the case of Ilya Mikheyev, I would say that he's failed at that right now. You can't go a quarter of the season without scoring goals if you're playing in the top six. You just can't. And with the value of that contract right now, like if you took that 4.75 that they have with him and you added it to the current cap space that they have, which is at 1.8, like you're looking at like $6.5 million that you could be playing with right now. And with the roster that the Canucks have today, it's not going to be the same next year. Again, talking about Pettersson, he's going to make a lot more money. Hronik's going to get paid.
Ghost of OEL.
Yeah. Hronik's going to get paid a lot more money. OEL's money hits you even harder next year. There's a whole bunch of UFAs that they have to fill. I believe it was 9, I think we talked about, with 11, I think, with the 2 RFAs. So again, like this, it's the perfect storm right now. It's the perfect salary cap storm, because that's really what you have to have. You have to have guys that are performing well on cheap tickets. And you're seeing that right now with Joshua. You're seeing that right now with Höglander. I mean, there's an argument as well. Pia Suter, what's he making? $2 million? But at 4.7, like you can't justify that right now. Here's my argument, and I don't want to sound redundant because I did sort of get into it last week as well. But like I said, if you can get that 4.75 off the books and then add that with that current space, like that could get you, another NHL depth defenseman, maybe some center depth. I feel like they need it on that fourth line. I have not loved Nils Aman's game over the last little while. I'm not going to pick on Nils Aman, but I feel like maybe if you added to that top six, then maybe you already have that center depth. If you are able to move somebody into that top six and then it bumps down Bluger or bumps down Suter, whatever it is, maybe you feel that down in the AHL. And I know I heard Dollywall talking about this on D&D this week. The fact that, Rutherford, what year was it when they won those back-to-back cups in Pittsburgh? Like they had Rust and Gensel like down in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. And, they came up and they added them in the playoffs and whatnot, and they were an integral part of it. But like, maybe they have that in Abbotsford. Like maybe that's the plan with Podkolzin. Saw the other day on socials, he scored a really nice goal. Looks like he's having a decent season down there. So I'm just wondering, like, exactly, maybe they feel like they have it there, but if you could get Mikheyev off this season and be working with what you have now, it would open up so many options for the Vancouver Canucks. I know he's got a modified no trade. I believe it's 12 teams, something like that. So there would be some work involved. But Aaron, if I trust anybody in the NHL to be able to work themselves out from underneath that contract, it's Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin. Good stuff this week, Aaron. Lots to dig in. And like I said, looking forward to the rest of the season right now, because it does feel like the level of play is leveling up now. And this is the best time of the year for hockey fans. Super Bowl is over. Football is over. Go time for the NHL right up until April. And then the real games start to happen. And I cannot wait for this city to be buzzing with playoff hockey once again, because there's really nothing better in the city than when the Canucks are in the playoffs and the city's all ingrained in what's going on.
Big games coming up at the end of the month too, and most of them at home. So yeah, like Chicago tomorrow.
Yeah.
Red Wings, Jets, then another quick little road trip with an 11 a.m. West Coast time start for Minnesota, which is just so weird on a Monday. But
let me pull up something here. Our buddy Jeff Patterson was tweeting something about the fact that the Canucks have played the most. Here it is. Yeah. Canucks 29th road game of the season. That's the most in the NHL. So after the game in Chicago on Tuesday, 17 of their final 28 at home. So you got to like that from the Canucks as well. J-Pat digging up the numbers as he does. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back next week. And if you're not following us on our socials, you can find all of those at sportshouse.ca. Also want to shout out our friends at 9 O'Clock Gun. Supplied us with a few hats to wear. A shout out, Rich. Check out 9o'clockgun.com. They make some of the best hats in BC. All right, everybody. Talk to you next week.